So happy for you to be here tonight. Welcome to the Empower Texans Central Texas 912 U.S. Senate Candidate Forum. Thank you for being here tonight. We have an exciting program for you. We're so thankful that our candidates have shown up to give you insight into their vision and their goals as you decide who will best represent you in Washington, D.C. and represent your values in Texas. I'm going to explain to you, oh, by the way, I'm Lisa Fritsch. Nice to meet you. I should say that. Each candidate, is everything all right? Each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to answer a question specifically tailored to their vision and their background. The questions will be asked in order that the candidates are seated, and they are seated in alphabetical order. Our panelists will each ask a question in order the way they're seated: Michael Quinn Sullivan, Maria Acosta, and Nelson Ramirez, and we will just go in order from there. After the question and answer segment, the candidates will have a 2-minute oration to deliver a summary of their vision for you as you decide who you'd like to vote for the U.S. Senate. On your seat, you will find this paper with each senator's candidate's name on it. We ask that you complete this. This isn't for you to take notes. Just complete this with feedback that you have for each candidate, things that you notice, things you'd like for them to explain. And it's going to be a completely confidential feedback form. We will take this and cut each candidate's name apart, and they will each receive their individual feedback form. So please make sure you do that. And then there's one for the 912 Project and Empower Texans as well. We ask that you please hold your applause until each candidate has completed their response. And now, before we get started, let's meet our candidates. Our first candidate is Glenn Addison. Glenn Addison grew up in Channelview, Texas until he was 11. He's lived in Magnolia, Texas for the last 39 years. And he spent most of his career as a self-employed businessman representing the Farmers Insurance Companies, and most recently, owner of Magnolia Funeral Home and Addison Funeral Homes in Spring, Texas. Glenn has served on the Magnolia ISD School Board for over 14 years, with 6 of those as the school board president. The Magnolia Chamber of Commerce named Glenn Addison Citizen of the Year. And Glenn and Lori Addison have 2 grown children. Glenn Addison. Next we have Andrew Castanuela, also known as Kaz. Andrew Castanuela was born in Brady, Texas. He served in the Air Force, where he was deployed to Thailand, Korea, and the United Arab Emirates. Castanuela has a degree in social psychology and has been a licensed chemical dependency counselor with Central Texas MHMR after retiring from the Air Force. Kaz has joined the race because, like most of us, he says he is tired from too much government and the decline of the protection of American values and morals and character. I think I will just say that Kaz wins in this category, as he and Diana have 6 children in Brownwood, Texas. Welcome. Our next candidate is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is the son of a Cuban immigrant, and his father came to America at 18 penniless. Cruz credits his success to seeing firsthand that the America's bedrock principle of the pursuit of happiness and freedom and opportunity is what makes America strong. Cruz went on to study at Princeton and graduated from Harvard magna cum laude, where he also served as editors, and get ready, he served as he edited a lot. I'm like, The Harvard Law Review, Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, and was founding editor of the Harvard Latino Law Review. Cruz has also served as director of the Office of Policy Planning at the Federal Trade Commission, Associate Deputy Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice, a policy advisor for Bush Cheney in 2000, and as clerk for Chief Justice William Rehnquist of the U.S. Supreme Court, who was the first Hispanic to do so for a Chief Justice. Ted Cruz served as Solicitor General of Texas from 2003 until 2008, and was the youngest Solicitor General in the nation, the longest serving in Texas, and the first Hispanic Solicitor General in Texas. He currently is a partner at Morgan, Lewis and Brocchius, LLP in Houston, where he leads the firm's U.S. Supreme Court and National Appellate Litigation practice. Ted and Heidi Cruz have 2 children and live in Houston, Texas. Please also welcome Elizabeth Ames Jones. Before becoming Texas Railroad Commissioner, Jones served 2 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where she was the chairman of Budget and Oversight for the Energy Resources Committee. Ames Jones was the first woman elected to a leadership position in the House Republican caucus and the recipient of numerous awards recognizing her work ethic and conservative leadership. Railroad Commissioner since 2005, Jones served as chairman for 2 years and was elected to a 6-year term in November 2005. Regarded as an expert in energy issues, Jones represents the Railroad Commission on the Coastal Coordination Council, is a member of the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, and is a former member of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners and the Southern States Energy Board. Her commentary on energy has appeared in journals all across the country, including the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Texas Business Journals. Elizabeth and Will Jones have 2 grown children. Welcome, Ms. Jones. Or Commissioner Jones, I should say. Please welcome next Tom Leppert. Tom Leppert has always been a businessman at heart. Raised by his single mother, Leppert worked his way through college, earning degrees from McKenna College and graduating with an MBA from Harvard Business School. He served as a White House Fellow in both the Treasury Department and in the White House under President Ronald Reagan. As a businessman, Leppert led national and international construction, finance, and real estate companies and served as CEO of the Turner Corporation, the nation's largest building company. Leppert was elected mayor of Dallas in 2007, where under his leadership, Dallas became a focal point of economic development, education, and public safety. As Dallas mayor, Leppert employed sound business principles and common sense to cut spending and bureaucracy. Tom and Laura have 3 children and live in Dallas. Welcome, Mr. Leppert. Please welcome Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick has been a member of the Texas Senate since 2007, and Patrick sees as his primary legislative accomplishment as having "In God We Trust" permanently displayed in our Senate chamber. In addition, he serves on the Finance Committee, is Vice Chairman of Education, serves on the Criminal Justice Committee, Health and Human Services, Intergovernmental Relations, and the Redistricting Committee, all key committees for the 82nd session. Patrick also hosts a daily radio program in Houston on AM 700. Dan and Jan have 2 grown children and live in Houston, Texas. Welcome, Dan Patrick. Last and certainly not least is Leila Pittenger. Pittenger was born in Lubbock, Texas to an agricultural family. She has been a dedicated community volunteer and activist to the Friends Foundation and has acted as the certified ombudsman in the state of Texas, where she also volunteers as a tax preparer for her community. Pittenger worked her way through college, where she earned a master's degree in dispute resolution from SMU, and in the last 3 years has become active in politics in Hays County, feeling the need to serve after becoming alarmed at the direction of the country. Pittenger says that she stood up to run because she did not hear a voice in Washington that represented her. Leila and Greg have 1 son and live in the Texas Hill Country. Welcome, Ms. Pittenger. Now let's meet our panelists who will be asking the questions. Thank you, fine candidates. Let's talk to Michael Quinn Sullivan. Michael, can you stand up so everyone can see your face? I'll just ask the panelists to stand up since their backs are facing you. Michael Quinn Sullivan is president and CEO of Empower Texans and its premier project, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. The Fort Worth Star Telegram said that Sullivan slays taxpayer dragons in Austin. Didn't know that. When the heat is on in Austin, Michael Quinn Sullivan knows how to make it even hotter. Texas Monthly recently dubbed him the enforcer on their list of the 25 most influential Texans. And as a former newspaper reporter, Capitol Hill staffer, and think tank vice president and Eagle Scout, way to go, Sullivan is an avid runner who lives in Austin with his family. Thank you, Michael Quinn Sullivan. Next we have Maria Acosta. Maria Acosta is the president and founder of Central Texas 912 Project and co-chair of the National 912 Project. Established in 2009, the 912 Project now has active chapters in Williamson, Hays, and Travis counties. Maria led services organizations in high tech for 14 years before becoming a conservative grassroots activist. She also serves on the board of the Williamson County Conservative Foundation. Thank you, Maria. Nelson Ramirez, please stand. Nelson Ramirez was born in New York City from Cuban parents, an entrepreneur that was involved in a couple of successful Austin startups. I think that's your person you want to hit up for a donation. Successful Austin startups. I just cracked myself up. And currently a partner in LGE Executives, an executive consulting firm where he's currently consulting at HP. In addition, he is the CEO and managing partner at Providence Partners and Associates, a high-tech staffing and consulting firm. He is a resident of Cedar Park with his wife and 2 kids and has been in the Austin area for 20 years. Nelson Ramirez, thank you. Without further ado, I think it's time to start. Thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be here with you all tonight. Thank you for coming and being an active part in the lives and politics of your community. Let's get started and go with our first question, which will be for Glenn Addison, and that will be coming from Maria.
Hi, Mr. Addison. Given the growing size of Social Security obligations, how will you address the burden new enrollees place on the system?
If you go to my website, which is glennaddison.com, you'll see 2 specifics that I propose to deal with that. I'm a firm believer in giving people choices. But those 2 specifics deal with the fact that the first thing I would immediately do is increase the age that one can initially begin drawing Social Security from 62 to 63. Just across the board, do that, boom, effective 2014. I would take office in January 2013. That's the first change. And then for those that are retiring beginning in 2014, those people would take, say they expect an initial check of $1,000, it would be 0.75% less than that. And then the people that retire in 2015, compared to what they expect today, would be at 1.5% less, and so on and so forth. Because we that are younger are going to have to work longer if we want to receive maximum benefits. And if we don't, this is where I favor choice, then we're going to have to accept the fact that because of longevity, we're going to have to receive smaller checks in the future. I do not propose cutting any current recipients because they've made their retirement plans based on that. But these series of cuts would eventually add up to 18% over a 24-year period, and then we would give the people the choice: work longer and maintain those higher level of benefits, or if you insist on retiring at 67, then you're not going to get as much as what you thought you would. I believe in giving people those kind of options. Thirdly, I do think that over a period of generations, we have to remember that we didn't get into this issue overnight. But over a period of generations, I do think that we should look at allowing people to begin to sock money away for themselves in addition to what's being paid into the system, and gradually over time transition to where people can have their own retirement plan that they own. I do not think that we can do that overnight because we as a society, as a country, have become addicted, if you will, and used to the current system.
Thank you. Our second question is for Mr. Kaz, or Andrew Castanuela, and it will be from Nelson Ramirez.
Hey Kaz, how you doing? As someone who's advocated for term limits, what is the maximum number of what's the maximum number of terms should someone serve in the Senate? And if elected, would you abide by those?
That's a very good question. I am an advocate of term limits. I think a U.S. Senator should serve 2 terms and that's it. Me personally, I can do it 1 term and then go home because I really don't need that kind of headache, so to speak. But here's the reality how it's going to happen. We have in the United States Senate, as well as the United States Representatives, individuals who are not going to vote for this. And there's going to have to be a compromise, and the compromise is going to have to be those who already are in office are going to have to be grandfathered in until 1 of 2 things happen. They retire or you kick them out. That's how you're going to be able to pass this through legislation. Because right now, if you go to Congress and you tell them, we're going to go with term limits, and I put that legislation before the House, as well as for the Senate, you're not going to get approval. They're going to fight you tooth and nail. But if you kind of give them the option, say, hey, look, you can do this until one or two things happen. You retire, or you go ahead and get kicked out by your constituents. And I do want to follow up real quickly on the Social Security thing. I think it's very important for us to take a look at Social Security. And one of the things we need to really do is we need to kind of get the Social Security funds out of the General Revenue Fund and put it back in the Social Security Trust Fund. And one of those things you do is you repeal the 1965 Social Security Act passed by Lyndon Johnson, which did exactly that. We need to start building Social Security Trust Fund back up, and we've got to start building that bank by having that out of the General Revenue Fund, because that's exactly what's going on with our deficit right now by borrowing from that money. Some other things we definitely need to do with Social Security, we need to stop taxing it. People are on a fixed income. They can't afford to be taxed. But thanks to President Clinton, who started taxing Social Security, we need to give that money back to the individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question for Ted Cruz. Michael Quinn Sullivan.
Mr. Cruz, the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution established the direct election of United States senators by popular vote. In your opinion, has this hurt the states, and how do you respond to those who say this amendment should be repealed?
Thank you for that question. There's no doubt that the 17th Amendment changed the balance of power in this country. Before the 17th Amendment was passed, the Senate was responsive to the states. It was the state legislatures who were picking the Senate. And as a consequence, senators were not likely to vote to steal power from the states and draw it into Washington. As part of the progressive movement, the 17th Amendment was passed, and it made all senators directly elected and facilitated the explosion of power in Washington. I think the fundamental challenge for all of us in this race is to stand up and lead the fight to stop the Obama agenda and to dramatically shrink the size, power, and spending of the federal government. If we didn't have the 17th Amendment, there is no doubt that would be an important structural check that would help us in that mission. But I'll tell you, there's another amendment that I think is even more important that we need to be focusing on, and that's the 10th Amendment. I have spent a lifetime supporting the 10th Amendment. When I was a student in college, my thesis in college was on the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. In 2010, I led the Center for 10th Amendment Studies at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And what we did in the Center for 10th Amendment Studies is developed a strategy to go and shrink the size, power, and spending of the federal government. Part of what we developed was a legal strategy to go after Obamacare. Because when you talk about the explosion of government power in Washington, there is no more egregious example than Obamacare. And the first bill that I will introduce in the U.S. Senate is a bill to repeal every syllable of every word of Obamacare. Thank you.
Our next question is for Elizabeth Lynch Jones and Maria Acosta.
Hello, Ms. Jones. The United States has for decades lacked a cohesive national energy policy, thereby limiting our energy independence. What should a policy include?
Thank you, Maria. What should a national energy policy look like? Well, as the chairman of the Railroad Commission, which is the energy oversight agency for the largest oil and natural gas producing state in the country, it's Texas, not Alaska, by the way. A lot of people get confused. Texas has set the gold standard on energy oversight. And because of what we do at the Railroad Commission, we have enabled an industry to drill now, drill here, and drill safely. That is very, very important. It wasn't under a state oversight agency like the Railroad Commission that the accident happened in the Gulf of Mexico. It was under the federal agency. So when people ask me about a national energy policy, what I know is that the states can do it best. And what we're seeing now are states that are getting into the game because they are becoming players because of the natural gas resources, thanks to hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, old technologies like hydraulic fracturing and old technology that is allowing for the unleashing of the natural gas reserves in this country that are keeping us safe and strong. So while you need state oversight, and I'm saying you need agencies like the Railroad Commission that have what they need to oversee an industry and make sure that it's done safely. You don't need a Department of Energy. You don't need thousands and thousands of bureaucrats who report to duty every single day, and you don't know what they've done to make you safer or more secure or more productive in any of our lives. I suggest we merge agencies. Get away from the Department of Energy, who's looking for another study, and an EPA that's looking for an even other study, and competing studies from competing bureaucrats trying to get their market share of studies. I suggest we cut agencies down to zero and let the states decide how they're going to regulate their energy industry.
Thank you. The next question is for Tom Leppert, Nelson Ramirez.
Mr. Leppert, we're going to get this one out of the way early for you, okay? As mayor of Dallas, you sought support of ACORN and SEIU. As a candidate seeking for the Republican nomination, how would you categorize your relationship with these two left-leaning organizations?
Well, I think probably the best way to start on the union is they oppose me now. And so that makes it very clear. The reality of it was, at that time that I ran for mayor, I pushed a bunch of organizations. And I told them that you should support me because I was going to be the best mayor. And indeed, I believe that turned out to be the case. In that situation, later on, the union came to me. They said, we need you to raise wages, we need you to raise benefits. My answer was very clear and very specific. There's no justification, and we don't have the money for it. That's why they opposed me today. In the terms of ACORN, it's a very simple one. There were dozens of different forums, much like this, that were conducted all the way through the city of Dallas, and all the candidates participated in those. I participated in those. I'll also tell you that I also believe it's important for all of us to reach out and touch people. I believe it's absolutely critical that we not only talk about a conservative agenda, but we make sure that we advance a conservative agenda. And I can tell you there's other people in the world that think differently than all of us do here. It is incumbent upon us to reach out and make sure that we frame the problems in the right way, communicate, and make sure that they understand how important these problems are in our position, and be able to adapt to those. So in summary, very simply, union doesn't support me now, very simply because I took and did what we should do in Washington, is make that hard choice. I'd also point out, of all the candidates up here, I'm the only one that's ever dealt with unions across the table. I'm the member I was the one that was a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Board, not very friendly organization, and I'm also the one that has called for national right to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leppert. Our next question is for Dan Patrick, Michael Quinn Sullivan.
Senator Patrick, looking at the growing regulatory burden on small business coming from the federal government, what, if any, limits should there be on the federal government when setting regulations through interstate commerce?
Thank you, Michael. And let me also have to kind of state this up front, that I'm not officially a candidate for the Senate. We'll make that decision in the next 10 days. I do that to just abide by the rules that we have to play by. First of all, thank you for organizing this tonight. And I'm going to take rapid fire for a couple of these questions. First of all, I hope everyone here will sign a pledge to 2 terms in the Senate. On your question directly, in the Texas Senate, I've been a leader on small business. I was very proud to get an A+ rating this session from Michael Quinn Sullivan's Empower Texas, and the top conservative rating from Texas Conservative Digest and Eagle Forum, as I have every session, because I've led the way on promoting growth in small business. We cut the small business tax, which I was not in session when it passed in 2006. I came in 2007, but I opposed that at the time. I thought the small business tax was intrusion. If we talk about intrusion, Michael, at the federal level and regulations, it's regulations, intrusions at the Texas level also. And so immediately I said I wanted to repeal that. We've not had the votes to repeal it, but I was able to push through legislation that cut the small business tax by $172 million and took 42,000 businesses off the rolls. As a U.S. Senator, if I get in this race, and if I were honored to have your vote and win, we've got to focus on small business. 80% of the businesses in the United States employ 50 people or less. That's where we have to get out of the way. Any person who becomes your next U.S. Senator is going to go into office in a breaking point of whether this country survives or not. This is not a time to send anyone to Washington without experience, ready to take on not just Democrats, but moderate Republicans and the mainstream media. And Mayor Leppert, I too have taken on the unions at the state level, as I did this session. fighting the Teachers Association when we cut education budget that had to be cut. I want to talk more about spending and budgets in a future question. But the bottom line is, Michael, what we all want as conservatives, we want to abide by the Constitution. We want limited government, less spending, and lower regulation. Get out of the way and give small businesses and individuals the liberty to be successful in this great nation. Thanks for the question.
Our next question is for Leila Pittenger, Maria Acosta.
Hello, Ms. Pittenger. As someone seeking to replace Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison in the U.S. Senate, what votes has she taken where you would have taken a different position?
I think I would start, is this on? I don't think it's on. Okay. I would start with the TARP bailout. I have a serious problem with that. Any business, any organization that is so big and in so much trouble that it takes 50 states to bail you out, we have a bigger problem than you needing money at the moment. And I think we need to seriously look at whether you're violating the antitrust acts. So I think that's a good start. I disagree with Senator Hutchison also when it comes to Roe versus Wade. Her justification on not overturning Roe versus Wade is she's worried that each of the states could become abortion havens. But if you believe in states' rights, then you should believe that each state has the right to determine how they're going to support or take down abortion. And the reality is the states are far more conservative than the federal government when it comes to abortion law, and especially in Texas with people like Dan Patrick who put the sonogram bill out front. So I disagree with her on that as well. A few other things I would say I disagree with her on. Saying you're going to step out and then not doing it. I think that's called flip-flopping, possibly. People talk about experience and they want to know what kind of experience I have. I say, well, if you're talking about lying, cheating, or flip-flopping on the issues, I have no experience. And I feel like we're getting way too much of that in the U.S. Senate right now, so I disagree with her on that in particular. Concerning a few of these other questions up here, I think that we need to think not just on our energy policy on a national level. We have to think beyond just energy security. We need to think about a few other things like food security. Right now in this country, we import more of our food than we're producing. In the early 1900s, a third of this nation was agrarian in nature. It is now 1% or less. If something happened that that ports were closed not only to oil and gas, but possibly to food, our country would be in serious trouble. If we were all to start tomorrow to try to grow our own food, it would take 7 years for our nation to be food secure, food independent. So when people talk to you about security, I want you to think beyond just the oil and gas and how it adds to the cost. I want you to think about what are we doing to protect our food as well.
Thank you. And we go to the second round, starting with Glenn Addison, Nelson Ramirez.
Mr. Addison, it was a pleasure meeting you earlier. What should the role of the federal government be in developing our economy?
I'm glad you talked about that or asked that question because I'd like to first begin with 3 problems that we have with our economy. One is Mr. Obama. He's got to be fired, and that's step 1. Secondly, we have got to restore the Constitution. And by that I mean that Article 1, Section 1 is blatantly disregarded on a daily basis. We have federal agencies and departments that are dictating to we the people and to the states on a daily basis, telling us how to live, how to conduct our affairs, and that must stop. And so if I'm senator, most of the legislation that I introduce will begin with the following 5 words. This bill is to repeal and fill in the blank. Those departments and agencies must be dismantled. Because right now, as a businessman, I can tell you that the heavy foot of the federal government is on the neck of the American economy. And the way that you get that boot off is by giving those powers to regulate back to the states. And then it should be up to Texas to decide how to deal, for example, with the sand dune lizard in Midland, Odessa. And if we don't like the way our legislators deal with that, we can fire them. We can't fire anybody from the EPA. But across the board, if it doesn't deal with nuclear, for example, it needs to go back to the states, all these regulations, because the states are incredible innovators they're great incubators of innovation. States compete against one another. Give those regulations back to the states and let them compete so that we can get this economy going again. The next thing I would do is cut the corporate tax from 35 to 25 across the board, except for manufacturing, in which case I would show bias toward manufacturing. It bothers me profoundly that we don't make very much stuff in this country anymore. Okay, you pick up an item, it says made in China, Vietnam, somewhere other than the U.S. I would say make it here, and we'll give you a 10% corporate tax rate. And across the nation, I would say to corporations, reopen these factories that you have closed, rehire American workers, and for 10 years, we won't charge you one dime of corporate tax on anything that you make in these reopened plants. I predict that the hiring would begin.
Our next question is for Andrew Castanuela, Michael Quinn Sullivan.
Mr. Castanuela, what's the nature and role of America on the world stage, and how do we best fulfill that role?
Thank you. Nature and the role. Two different. Wow. Well, first of all, President Obama didn't help us a lot with that, to be honest with you. One of the things when we're looking at world stage, or we're looking at foreign policy, you have to look at the role that our allies play in that process. Our allies are the ones who are at the forefront, who are going to assist us not only economically, but strategically from a military perspective. We need to re-engage our friendships and our commitments to our allies, including redeploying the nuclear weapons or the SAMs back in Eastern Bloc countries. We need to get the Russians to let them know we're still in the game of defending ourselves. We keep on forgetting the concept that it's just Iraq and it's just the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But I'm sorry, North Korea didn't go anywhere, China didn't go anywhere, and neither did Russia. And on top of that, they're actually building their military weapons. As a matter of fact, China built their first aircraft carrier just not too long ago. You see, we got to start thinking beyond the concept of just one thing. The other thing has to do even with Israel, for instance. Right now, Senator Leahy is proposing cutting off the funding for special elite forces in Israel right now, just because he feels like they're doing human violations or human rights violations. Well, what the heck are the doggone Hamas doing? You see, this is where the concept that they kind of lose sight of exactly what is going on from the foreign perspective. What we need to do is we need to reestablish those friendships, and we need to start utilizing that to our advantage. Okay. I do want to also expand that, yes, I do work with unions, because when you're in the United States military, we have one of the biggest civil services in the world. And when you have to deal with stewards and labor unions to try to do pay raises and bonuses, there's a lot of other stuff you got to do, because it takes an act of Congress to go through that process. I think that's what we need to be focused on in reference to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question for Ted Cruz, Maria Acosta.
Hello, Mr. Cruz. How do you respond to criticism that since the Attorney General chooses the Solicitor General's causes, you don't have an official record of your own?
Thank you, Maria, for that question. Well, I will say I am deeply honored to have been appointed by Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott in 2003 when he became Attorney General, and I spent 5.5 years, and many, many hours, more hours than I could do the math on, serving under General Abbott. And I'll tell you, General Abbott is my dear friend and mentor, and I think he's the finest Attorney General in all 50 states. And there is no doubt whatsoever that if we didn't have a strong principled Attorney General in that office, we would not be able to stand up and lead the fight. But I'll tell you, when I started in that job, early 2003, I sat down with General Abbott and he gave me the following marching orders. He said, look across the country, and if we can stand up and fight to defend conservative principles, go and do it. And talk about an incredible job, man. As the Solicitor General, I was the chief lawyer for the state of Texas in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and all the state and federal appellate courts. And with that mandate and with the support of General Abbott, we began leading the conservative fights all over this country. We defended the Ten Commandments. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court. We won 5-4. We defended the Pledge of Allegiance. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court. We won unanimously. You take an issue like the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is an issue I've been passionate on all my life. My very first client when I was a baby lawyer at a law firm was the NRA. When the D.C. gun case was happening and the Second Amendment was under attack, Texas took the lead, assembling a coalition of states and defending the Second Amendment. I had the honor of arguing in the Court of Appeals in support of the individual right to keep and bear arms. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court and we won 5-4. Over and over again, as Solicitor General, I was honored to stand up and lead the fights in court, to write the briefs, to argue the case, and to find the cases with Attorney General support that we would fight and win, and that's the record I am proud to run.
Next we have Elizabeth Ames Jones, Nelson Ramirez.
So in your current role overseeing energy policy here in the state, the EPA is on the verge of targeting Texas with a rule that could undermine Texas electric grid because of air pollution. How will you, in your current capacity and/or as senator, improve the relationship and fight for Texas?
If you're asking me, thank you, Nelson, the question is about the EPA and what they are doing now, attacking Texas in another way, yet another way, to put the brakes on our growth and prosperity and our job creation and our independence and our rugged wildcatter spirit. The EPA has us in their sights. You're talking about the cross-state air pollution controls that the EPA is mandating yet another range of regulations on electric generation plants. That's on the oversight of the TCEQ and the PUC, but the Railroad Commission has the same problem with energy generation from the ground below, and the EPA is trying to put the brakes on the production of Texas oil and natural gas. Yet another bureaucracy that has Texas in its scope, just like the Department of Energy that has Texas in its scope, to try and undermine what we here in Texas have created for so long. And what I would do would be able to cut the funding of an agency that has gone rogue. We haven't even talked about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the listing of a lizard in the oil patch of the greatest oil field that this nation has known, that produces 20% of all our oil, and that's in the Permian Basin over in West Texas. There are another lizard in the Eagle Ford, the new shale play in South Texas. It's creating jobs and prosperity. These are not the only federal agencies that have us in their sights, though. It's not just Interior. It's not just Energy. It's not just the EPA. And we've got to have somebody with the experience and the know-how to go up there and know where the devil is, and that is in the details. To cut these agencies, cut the umbilical cord, release us from the growing federal government, the largest expansion since the New Deal. And I'm the person who can do that. And talk to you. I see time. I can barely see time there, but they told me it's up.
Thank you. Next we have a question for Tom Leopard, Michael Quinn Sullivan.
Mr. Leopard, you've said that you want to simplify the tax code, make it more straightforward and fair. What specific changes would you support that would make the tax code more fair for individuals and families?
First, I'll be very specific on how I would do that, and I'll deal with it on the individual, and then I'll move to the business. What is absolutely critical is that we reform the tax code and change the framing of this argument, as opposed to one group wins and one group loses, but instead address the real issue. The real issue is we have to have an economy that's going to grow. That's going to grow substantially above the projections that we're seeing today, and what we have is fundamentally a stagnant economy. So what we would do on the individual side is make it a very simple, straightforward, much broader process. Today we have 51% of the people in this nation that don't pay taxes. That's a problem for all of us that do. So what we need to do is, again, be very specific. Flatten it. Eliminate all of the deductions with the exception of only two, charitable and mortgage interest. Those stay. Other than that, all go out. A very large deduction on the front end for individuals and especially for families. Then move over to the corporate side. Today we have a corporate tax rate of 35%. At one time the United States corporate tax rate was one of the lowest in the industrialized world. Today it's at the highest. It needs to be 19%. The median across the industrialized world is 18 to 20. We need to be at the 19%. That will not only re-energize investment here, but it'll also bring what I estimate hundreds of billions of dollars back. In addition to that, we've got to eliminate double taxation. Double taxation comes from dividends, it comes from state taxes, and it comes from gift taxes. Those need to be eliminated and go forward. Finally, we need to encourage investment. That investment is reflected for the most part on capital gains. That capital gains needs to be at 15%. Those are the changes that we need to make, again, to energize this economy and grow it, and also create a tax system that all of us can have faith in. With doing this, we could reduce the filing for most Americans to literally down to a page, probably not any more than the receipt that you got at the fast food place that you went to for lunch today. Those are the specific examples of that. I can tell you that not only will it make it a better situation, a fairer situation for all of us, it will make it simpler, broader, flattener, and importantly, grow this economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Patrick has a question from Maria Acosta.
Hello, Senator Patrick. Given the known fiscal and other policy challenges facing Texas in the 2013 session, should Texans be concerned that Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, State Senator Mike Jackson, and yourself are running for federal office rather than directing your energy and experience on issues closer to home?
I'm not an official candidate yet, but the Governor Dewhurst, oh, he's not here. I'm sorry.
Duly noted.
Let me talk about the budget for a moment, because this is important. At the federal level, we bring in about $2.4 trillion a year, and we spend $3.7. We spend $795 billion in pensions, $964 billion for the military, $882 billion for welfare, $130 billion for education, and $160 billion for everything else. The problem that we have with the federal government is they will not make the tough choices to cut where they have to cut. When you add up the programs I just mentioned, defense, welfare, pensions, education, and other, it's $3.1 billion of the total budget. This past session, I served on finance, and there were 10 Republicans, 5 Democrats. I was the only Republican on the committee who voted no on the budget because they wanted to spend $3 billion of the rainy day fund for the next budget. And I led a group of 6 other Republicans not on finance, and we stopped that. And we made the tough choice, because you have to make tough choices. In the Texas budget, 92% of every dollar is education, health care, and public safety. So we're going to have a problem in the next session. Make no mistake, we're going to probably face about a $15 billion shortfall. Good that we kept the rainy day fund. I'm glad we prevailed on that. So the question is, why am I considering running for this? I can't speak for David Dewhurst, and I cannot speak for Mike Jackson, what they're doing, and surely can't speak for the governor for what he's doing. Here's my final analysis. It's not about offices you want to win or you think you can win. I think if I get in the race, I have a good opportunity to make the runoff with the rich guy and to maybe beat him in the runoff. It's where we can best serve. And the reason, and I've only had about 5 weeks to do my due diligence on this race since the special session ended, and my constitutional responsibility was to focus on that, not this race. But the decision I'm going to make in the end is not about me, but where can I best serve? And if I make the decision that the best place I can serve is just staying in the Texas Senate, then that's the decision I will make. The decision is going to be where I can best serve, not the office I want to win. And I'll make that decision in the next 7 to 10 days. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Leila Pittenger and Nelson Ramirez has your question.
How you doing? You have referred to children as the youngest victims in the debate on illegal immigration. What do you mean by that?
I do not believe taxpayers should be required to pay for the education, health care, or care of illegal immigrant children. I do not believe you should be, by force, required to support people who are breaking the law. But a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 12-year-old cannot help what their parents did by bringing them over here. And while we're deciding what to do with their parents, whether we're going to send them back or under this administration, just go ahead and let them stay, I believe that the children do need care. And I believe we need non-governmental organizations to lead the way on that. And if you believe in it, then you should be able to donate your money to that cause and help in that way. But you should not be requiring law-abiding citizens to pay for the care of people who are breaking the law. So when I say that they are just truly victims in this, that's what I mean. They cannot help what their parents did. They can't help themselves. They can't walk out and hire an attorney to work on becoming citizens, but they still need care. And whatever we do to the least of these, we will have to answer for, I believe, to our Creator. So if you believe as an individual in giving to a charity that helps with their health care, with their education, with even teaching them English because there's a possibility the government won't send them back, then that should be your right to give that money, but it's not your right to require everybody else to pay for someone else breaking the law and having benefits accordingly. Which I think leads to the question, if someone's born here, do we have birthright citizenship? And I think there needs to be some clarification on that amendment to the Constitution. I believe when they wrote that amendment, it was to care for people who were brought over here by force in murderous ways for murderous reasons. And they had no finances to go back to where their home was. That is not the case of the people who are coming over here, giving birth to children, and then staying permanently for benefits. I think we have to make an adjustment to that when it comes to birthright citizenship. I personally believe that the parent that is giving birth needs to be a U.S. citizen in order for the child to be a U.S. citizen. So thank you for that question, Nelson.
This concludes the question and answer portion of our forum. We now move on to the 2-minute summaries of each candidate. The candidates have pre-drawn a number in the green room to determine the order in which they speak. And our first candidate tonight is Andrew Castanuela.
It's the first time after all these I get to be the first one. I'm usually the last one, so that was my lucky day. First of all, let me say thank you very much for inviting us. Y'all did an excellent job putting this together, and I really like the format. It really gives an opportunity to kind of expand, and I like the drill questions because that's the way they should be, to be honest with you. We were in there taking a picture earlier, and in all due respect to Ross Perot, but I felt like Ross Perot because I was the shortest one in the picture, and I said, God dang, I remember he was on stage in the debates. But with that said, let me go ahead and expand a little bit of why I feel like I will make your next U.S. Senator. Every candidate is a great candidate. From my left to my right. To be honest with you, we hang out together, we know each other inside and out, and they're great people. And each one of us has their own strengths. Some of us are in business, some of us are in law, some of us are in family, and more in business, some in energy. So you ask yourself, what the heck does this guy know about? What is he going to do for me? Well, the only thing I bring to the table is really what every one of those other agencies really need. Leadership. Leadership. That is what every citizen wants. We want to be able to trust our elected officials, that they stand by their word. We want to be able to trust and say, if you say you're going to go for 6 years, or you're going to go for 12, that you do that. You say that you're going to drop out of the race, that you're going to drop out of the race. You say you're not going to raise taxes, you don't raise taxes. If you're going to say you're going to stand for American exceptionalism, then you stand by American exceptionalism. You do not go behind the curtains. Now this whole race, in my opinion, is built on one thing: trust. That's what it really is. Trust. Who do you trust? And I leave you this question: who would you trust to put not only your family, but your country in their hands to make sure it's taken care of? Not only for you, but for your kids and your grandkids. I've proven that trust, and I don't have a problem dying for it again. Thank you.
Leila Pittenger.
Thank you again, all of you, for coming out. Thank you to the panelists. I think this was wonderful because you got to see a little step further behind just what's on our website. So I hope you will go to our websites because there's much more information. This is just scratching the surface. Why am I running? I looked up and I didn't see my voice in the U.S. Senate. I looked at the fact that we only have one conservative woman in the entire U.S. Senate. And she's also the only one who's undoubtedly the pro-life woman in the U.S. Senate. I believe that voice is more than 1/100th of this nation. And I think it's important we take that voice forward. I have a passion for my country, and I have a passion for actually living values and not letting them just be talking points. I think it's time that we have candidates who are living like the rest of us, who are experiencing the economy the same way we are, that are struggling the same way we are, and have lived through the real effects of the legislation being passed in Washington, D.C. Because I can tell you this much, the folks that are living up there sure aren't living through it. I think it's time that we get people who are having to get different experiences to get through life. As much as I love attorneys, we have 60 attorneys in the U.S. Senate right now. I think we need more variety when it comes to perspectives and training and background and interactions with people. I think it's time that we get new perspective when it comes to what do we do if this fails. And it can't just be about blame the other person. If you're looking for someone to go to Washington, D.C. and be on Fox News, shaking her finger and calling people names and blaming someone, then I'm definitely not your person. Because I'm up there to get a job done, I'm not going up there to play the blame game. I think both parties have done their fair share of making a mess in this country, but I believe without a doubt, the people who are standing up now and getting involved after what they've seen in the last few years are going to change all that. And I think that we can change all that, but that means we're going to have to do things differently. We can't do politics as usual, and we can't be picking our candidates by the way the pollsters say we should. Because the folks who make the most money from this want you to continue to do it the same old way. I encourage you to look around, take a look at each candidate and ask yourself, will this person truly be a voice like mine in Washington, D.C.? I believe I will, and I hope you go to my website, LeilaForSenate.com, to learn more. Thank you very much.
Next is Ted Cruz.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. We're in an extraordinary time in our nation's history. Barack Obama is the most radical president this nation's ever seen. And we're out here on a Saturday night because we're concerned about the future our kids inherit. If we don't stop the explosion of spending and power in Washington, America will cease to be a free market nation. Now, in this Senate primary race, you have one simple question before you that let me suggest you should answer. Which candidate is best prepared to stand up and lead the fight to stop the Obama agenda, to defend free market principles, and to defend the Constitution? The stakes couldn't be higher. Just 2 weeks ago, the credit of the United States was downgraded for the first time in their history of our nation. If I had suggested that a year ago, that would have been crazy talk, that the U.S. credit would be downgraded. And the president had the audacity to blame that on the Tea Party. You know, that's a little bit like Charlie Sheen blaming it on the Betty Ford Clinic. It's not understanding the cause of the problem. I'm running for Senate based on a proven record of over a decade, over and over again, standing up, fighting to defend conservative principles, and winning on a national level. One of the most significant fights was the Medellin fight, where we stood up and fought the World Court. We fought the United Nations. We fought the President of the United States. I argued it twice in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and we defended U.S. sovereignty and won 6-3. My dad came to Austin in 1957 when he was 18. He couldn't speak a word of English. He had no possessions. He had $100 in his underwear. And he worked as a dishwasher just down the street, making 50 cents an hour. He had been imprisoned and tortured in Cuba, and when I was a kid, he told me over and over again, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? That's why I'm running. Thank you.
Next we have Tom Leppard.
Thank you. Thank you to Central Texas 912 and to Empower Texas for putting this on, and thank you for each one of you being here. We, over the course of the last hour or so, have talked a lot of issues. We've talked everything about the United States' position in the world to various policy matters. The reality of it is all tied to a strong and growing economy. The reality of it, where we stand today, is the fiscal mess in Washington, with people that haven't told us the truth, has led us to near bankruptcy, and being considered in the same breath as countries like Greece and Spain. We also have an economy that's stagnant. Here in Texas, we saw that our unemployment rate went to 9.4%, 8.4%, and the national is slightly over 9%. That would be fine if it was the right number. The right number on the national level is a lot closer to 16%, because again, Washington wants to play with the numbers. For too long, we have sent politicians to Washington. Politicians who wanted to be career politicians or wanted to have a life in public office. People that haven't created jobs, they haven't signed both sides of a paycheck. And the reality of it is, if we don't address the strength of our economy and see it grow strong and address the fiscal mess, then we're not going to have a strong nation. I was raised by a single mom. She worked very hard every single day to support us. But what she was really working for was to give me a better life. And fortunately, she did. We're going to be the first generation, 13 generations, that's not going to be able to pass on something better and stronger. Now, we can go ahead and send the same people to Washington, and we'll have the same things happen. Or we can send some people that have actually had to make some tough choices on spending in the public and the private sector. We can send somebody that's actually created jobs, not talked about 7-second sound bites and that first paragraph of let's cut spending, let's create jobs, but someone that's actually created jobs. My last position, I created 2,300 jobs. The reality of it is we have to have people that have led something. 3 years ago, this nation elected someone that made good speeches and had never led. What has that gotten us? We need different leadership, leadership that's committed to making the tough choices. And that's why I offer myself. Thank you very much for having me.
Glenn Addison.
As a small businessman, when I have a bad month, nobody bails me out. I'm sick and tired of career politicians and establishment candidates and the elitists telling me how I need to vote. We've got people all over the state that are committing insanity every 2 years by voting the same way over and over and over, and I'm tired of it. And so I offer myself as a common man who's got some common sense solutions. Go to my website, check me out. Now, some of us have been talked down to because we've not argued before the highest court in the land. But I'll tell you what, when I was in college, I thought Colin Powell was a good conservative because he worked for a good conservative. So just because you work for a conservative doesn't make you a good conservative if you don't have a record of making your own paycheck and not being on the government payroll, etc. Okay? And so I'm a bit tired of being talked down to because I'm a common man. Now, I will tell you this. We need somebody up there that will take the fight to them, that has the backbone to stand up and say, no more. This will not stand. Now, we got some people on this stage that have quite a few hooks in them already. In fact, when they go to the airport, they have to go through a special way because the machine starts going off with all those hooks in them, you see. Nobody's got their hooks in Glenn Addison, okay? I'm a bit tired of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Now, I'll give you an example of how common sense should be taking place, and it's not. On the school board in Magnolia, we wanted to have our pre-kindergarten kids go Tuesday and Thursday one week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday the next week. That way we could eliminate midday bus routes. It would save our district $240-something thousand a year. It would save across the state of Texas tens of millions of dollars. Guess what we were told? No, you can't do it that way. And we say, why? Because we say so. It's time that we have people with some common sense in Washington, D.C. that will get up there and, like Charlton Heston said, you'll pry my gun from my cold, dead hands. All right? I don't mind telling you that we better get away from doing the same thing over and over again because this nation is circling the drain. Okay? If we keep doing the same thing over and over, we are going down. And so you people that get this little tingly feel on your left leg when you hear a good speech, you need to get over that and look at all of us and save this country before it's too late.
Well, then, Mr. Preston. Very nice. Next is Elizabeth Ames Jones.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday night, and all of us could be doing a lot of other things, but nothing gives me a greater privilege than being able to be here and stand up to you and ask you for your vote and your support. I stood for election 11 years ago, and the people elected me to be a citizen legislator, to go and fight for them in the halls of government right down the road. I wasn't hired by anybody, and I'm not the smoothest talking person, but you know what? I've got the core convictions that were born and bred in Texas, and I've been steeped in them from the time at the dinner table. I come from the people who cleared the land, who've been here for generations, and I know what makes Texas great. And it's not the party, it's not the Republican Party, it's not all these associations, it's the people. It is you. You are the root of all the great things that have happened in this state and all the great things that are going to happen in this country. Margaret Thatcher said, we have no liberty without economic liberty. That was a great question, Michael. What can the government do? They can do nothing. They have to unleash the entrepreneurship and the innovation and the ingenuity of the American people and let it go. They have to get out of the way and live up to the founding fathers and their vision for the country for years and decades and generations to come. The precious 10th Amendment, yes it is my favorite amendment too, Ted. And I didn't just talk about it. I didn't write a paper about it. I lived it and people elected me to uphold it in the Texas legislature, where you are closer to the people. And the federal government is doing too much and they have got to cut that cord and send back to the people so you all can be part of the process. And they have to do less and be more efficient and let us live up and live our own dreams. So yes, I am running for the United States Senate. I was elected as a citizen legislator. I know what it means. Yes, I was picked and then elected to be an energy steward. And I've worked hard for the people of Texas. And I think the proof is in the numbers. It's been a great privilege to be serving you here. I look forward to serving you later and living up to the dreams of all of the people in this room. and those who can't be with us tonight. God bless you all, and God bless Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out on this Saturday. I do have a tough decision to make because Maria's right. If Rick Perry and David Dewhurst get elected, and I think there's a likelihood both could, the Texas Senate will pick the next governor and lieutenant governor, potentially. There's a constitutional question on that. And I have to decide, do I want to be in that fight? Or do I want to run for this office? Because that is a key fight for us. I don't want to see 12 Democrats and 4 Republicans pick the next governor. And there'll need to be someone there on the line to fight. When I ran for office in 2006, I was the last guy in the race. I was up against 2 House chairmen. The lobby supported them, and they said Dan doesn't have a chance. And because of the issues, not because of me, because of the issues, we won that race with 69% of the vote, an historic vote. And it was the beginning of the Tea Party. We didn't call it the Tea Party then, but it was the grassroots. And I made a pledge that I would be the most conservative senator and lead the Senate to the right. And Michael Quinn Sullivan knows that I have, because every session I've been in, I'm rated either the top or the second most conservative member. And I passed legislation to help business, to put under God in our pledge, in God we trust in the Senate, the sonogram bill. And I led the fight to reduce spending. You need to send someone to Washington who's ready to go and who's been tested. The Bible says, know them by their fruits. I've cast over 12,000 votes in 3 sessions. You can look at the record. Go to danpatrick.org. If I'm not in this race, it's going to be because I think I can serve conservative cause better in Texas. And I hope you will pick the best person you think will fight for you. In my closing minute, what I want to say, this is really about you. It's not about us. Politicians come and go. We're there for a short time. Some are there too long. But the issues never change. The conservative principles and values that our Constitution was founded upon are the same then, they're the same today. And the path for this country out of this disaster that we're in under this current administration will be based on conservative principles and values. You need to send whomever it is you select. And if I'm in the race, I hope you'll give me consideration. You need to select someone who has a proven record that you can count on, will hit the ground running, will take on Democrats, the mainstream media, and moderate Republicans, and put this country back on the track of those conservative values that our Constitution was founded upon. Thank you. It's been a privilege to be here.
That concludes the forum portion of our program. We'd just like to thank you all for sharing your time with us this Saturday night. Of course, this event would not be possible without so many people who helped pull this together. Would you please join me in giving a warm welcome, applause to our sponsors, Empower Texans and the Central Texas 912 Project, along with several volunteers who helped us with the logistics, coordinating the room, the communications, and getting these candidates here. Just let me say all the names and then we can thank them together. Thank you, Debbie DePaul. Thank you, Lori and Amy. Mark Smith, our photographer. Andrew Kerr with the logistics. I'm sorry, you've got a camera there. He's perpetrating, Mark Smith. We'll thank you too. Bob Green. Mark Smith, the photographer for Central Texas 912 Project. And Maria Acosta, Nelson Ramirez, and Michael Quinn Sullivan, thank you. We hope that you learned something tonight from these candidates, and we appreciate your service and your leadership, and we also hope you had to answer some tough questions. We hope we've given some insight into who you should vote for. Following this, please meet our candidates in the foyer, where they will be able to answer questions from you, give you some cute bumper stickers, and just meet you and get to know you on a more personal level. Before we leave, I'd also like to leave with a quote from one of Texas's most influential members of the Texas Senate, and who later went on to be a U.S. Congresswoman. She's one of my heroes, Barbara Jordan. And that is, we only ask that when we stand up and talk about one nation under God, liberty, justice for everybody. We only want to be able to look at the flag, put our right hand over our hearts, repeat those words, and know that they are true. God bless you, God bless Texas, and God bless the United States of America. Oh, I have one more thing. Wait, clap on a second. I have one more thing. Look in your pamphlet, and if you do have a bookmark that looks like this, check your pamphlet. Do you have it? You do? Congratulations. I'm giving away copies of my book, Obama Tea Party Isn't God, in the foyer. And so if you have one of these and it has a signature on it, please meet me out there to get your free signed copy. Thank you.